It is the third of the sixth, 2025. The time is 10:39. A little bit of a difference here. Do you know what I mean? Had to get rid of some of the overgrowth because my missus didn't like it. But that doesn't mean that there isn't a very many F1 centric threads at which we need to pull over the next 10 or 15 minutes. We will talk to all of them. The jury's still out for many on whether Maximilian Verstappen was guilty as charged, but not for Helmut Marko, who's now chimed in on the incident between him and George Russell turn 5, and he said that he thinks Max Verstappen deserved the penalty. So too we'll talk about Sir Lewis, because it's techier than techie things as far as all things Sir Lewis Hamilton. The performance hasn't been there. We haven't matched up to the expectations. John Elkann, the C-suite exec level bods, will be wanting payback. They want to see a return on their not insubstantial $99 million per year. And Lewis Hamilton, as far as his responses to his performance at the Spanish Grand Prix, were chaotic. Let's talk to Helmut Marko in the first instance. Outlaw, we're going in. I know it's a bit different. It had to be done, Benzi. It was overdue. Sadly, I'm getting a bit older and a bit more recessionary, let's say. Go on, let's talk to Helmut Marko in the first instance, because by now you'll have seen Max's non-apology in inverted commas. Max released something on Instagram saying words to this effect, that it's an incident that shouldn't have happened. No apology as of yet, but I think that's as close as we're going to get from Maximilian Verstappen. Many in the F1 space have said that was appalling. Max should have got a black flag. Nico Rosberg said words to those effects. Many have said, what do you expect from a fire-breathing dragon in Maximilian Verstappen? Some saying soon to be 5-time champion, notwithstanding the fact that the Dutchman is now 49 points even behind the lead in the driver's standing. Oh, the humanity. Helmut Marko's chimed in now, not long after Christian Horner, who said at the time that he hadn't yet had time to have a conversation with Max Verstappen, that he hadn't seen the incident. He did the no sell one, didn't he? Christian, bless him. Again, what Christian can't do is be seen to subvert and or undermine Maximilian Verstappen, lest we forget that there is still rumour and speculation as to the future destination of Max Verstappen. 2028 is when his contract with the Bulls that are red expires. Between now and then, there will be suitors, a very many of them. Mention no names. Lawrence Stroll's Aston Martin. Mention no names. The boys and girls at Brackley and Brixworth, in the form of Toto, the boy who cried wolf. Now, though, Helmut Marko's come out and he said something. Again, objectivity and truth are of value, are they not? Helmut Marko's leaned in per Autosport's Emily Selick and says, I don't know what kind of thought process was going on in Max Verstappen's head. He told Service TV on Monday night that the decisive moment as far as Max Verstappen's race unravelling was when he lost the pace to Charles Leclerc on the straight. And again, which way do you cut that one? Charles Leclerc has come out since and said, well, to be fair, if Max Verstappen was very vocal around that overtake, then I probably would have been too. But I needed to do that because it felt like he was inching me onto the marbles. That's what modern day journalese had to say. Helmut Marko had this to say. On the straight, I'd say Charles Leclerc drove into Max's car. Touche. I don't know how you can watch that incident, as we all did at the time, Anthony Davidson, after the fact, and say that anything to the contrary happened. Charles Leclerc agreed, right, that he was inching Max Verstappen over because he wanted the geometric racing line. Helmut Marko continues. Then came the situation with Russell when the Briton attempted to pass into turn 1 but went off the track. And you have to say, Max knows the regulations in detail. He immediately said, hey, George was out of control and that's why I had to go wide down the runoff area. True, of course, but then it's a shame that GP and the decision makers at Red Bull didn't see it like that. Lest we forget, and again, we're going to have to recount it because context is key. As at 2025, June of, there are 3 things that you need if you're overtaking somebody up the inside. Positionally, your front axle needs to be, at the very least, alongside their wing mirrors. That's the first one, Exhibit A. Exhibit B, in the second instance, you will need to be under control at all times. Exhibit C, you have to keep your four wheels even, within track limits. Keep it on the black stuff on the island. Two of those things George Russell ticked, but the middle one, the second one, by dint of his cheeky understeer moment at the apex, you've got to say that 2 of 3 isn't 3 of 3, and that's what you'll need to comply if indeed you're putting a wheel up the inside of somebody, as at June 2025. So it's a wonder why GP and co didn't review that and didn't give Maximilian Verstappen the command to stay ahead. And again, that's uncharacteristic of Red Bull. They normally race hard. They would never ordinarily, especially under the tutelage of Jonathan Wheatley, legend, now team principal at Sauber, they would never cede. Feels a bit weird that they would give, especially when they didn't need to. Had they reviewed the tape, they would have seen the steering inputs of King George Russell of Kings Lynn, Norfolk, and known that. Helmut Marko continues. The internal discussion was that it was 50-50 though, and since it happened right after the safety car period, the impact of a 10-second penalty is much greater than if it happens mid-race. So that was one thing. Max didn't want to give the position back, but he was instructed to do so. He did it under protest and or duress. So it's interesting. You understand now that the Red Bull, that the thought process behind Red Bull wanting to give the place back, that the 10 seconds, again, safety car settings, the 10 seconds was going to be chaotic, of gargantuan consequence, material consequence for Max Verstappen, as it ultimately was when they gave it to him on the back of the collision between him and George Russell. So article continued that Max lifted off the throttle, so we all assumed, Max lifted the throttle, so we all assumed he was letting George through, and then suddenly he accelerated again, Marko recalled. I don't know what kind of misjudgment or thought process was going on inside him, and then, as they all say, all hell broke loose. Maximilian Verstappen lost his mind. He was fuming at the perceived injustice in the first instance, the Charles Leclerc collision on the straight. In the second instance, the cheeky understeer moment from George Russell of Kings Lynn, Norfolk. And then in the third instance, having to give back the place on the back of that. Now, I understand. Do the first two excuse the third? No, absolutely not. But you get it. You understand. And we can draw very clearly solid causation lines. Helmut Marko continued, there have already been issues in the past. Helmut Marko said of Verstappen's previous clashes with George Russell, lest we forget Qatar in 2024. It was unnecessary, says Helmut Marko, and a lot of points were lost, 9 to be precise, at the altar of the 10-second penalty. But because of all the incidents and the wrong decisions and that had unfortunately happened, emotions, says Helmut Marko, simply got the better of him. Oh, the humanity. I'm telling you, we're going to be having a conversation about this between now and the rest of the season, because again, the Maximilian Verstappen naysayers have said on the back of this that dude is rubbish, that his aggression gets the better of him, and that means that he can't drive. And I would contend, as a Max Verstappen, a self-confessed Max Verstappen fan / glazer, that that's not the point. That those points, those instances, don't overtype the Suzukas. They can't overtype the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix qualifying. They exist in their own spaces, and the twain shall not meet. They should never meet, particularly if you ingest your Formula One through the lens of sporting endeavour par excellence. Helmut Marko bookends his statement as follows. He says, admission from Max doesn't come easy, and don't forget he's already got a bit of a feud going on with George Russell, so of course it was going to get heated. Marko also went on to explain, everyone goes their own way, and when Max is in a mood like that, the best thing is to just leave him alone. I don't think the post-mortem, the post-race debrief at Red Bull would have gone on very long. You saw and heard Max's mood when Brooks sequestered him and pushed him. He was like, does it even matter? I prefer to talk about the race. Cognizant of the risk at getting more penalties for coming out and criticising the regulatory body in the FIA, bringing the sport into disrepute per the legend that is Mohammed Ben Sulayem. Oh, and by the way, if we're going to talk about Lewis Hamilton, let's talk about Lewis Hamilton, because the performance hasn't been performancing. Lewis Hamilton fans, stands, fundamentalists and extremists all around the world were living in the hope that Lewis Hamilton was going to deliver on the promise of the unprecedented eighth. I too hoped that I would see and live through an unprecedented eighth championship of the drivers' variety. I did. But again, I'm a realist, inherently sceptical of all of these things, particularly when we see the big marketing campaign. Lewis Hamilton stood in front of the Ferrari F40, that Scuderia Ferrari car, the red car with a yellow badge, black prancing horse atop. Sceptical was I, particularly when you realise that Lewis is 40 years old and that there's only been a few 40-year-old champions in F1 history. 66 Brabham, 57 Fangio, 1950 Nino Farina, and they were all 100,000 gazillion years ago. Plus, you'd be desperately, you would have to disbelieve the evidence of your own eyes and ears if you don't think that Lewis Hamilton has changed as an F1 pedal over the past 24 months. Because let me tell you this, big and serious, look the camera dead in its eye. Lewis Hamilton of 2007, of 2014 is not Lewis Hamilton of 2023 and 4, because there's no way that dude would let a King George Russell out qualify him with such frequency. There is no way. Nobody would be able to argue that with a straight bloody fate. No chance. Zero. Gonzo. Kaput. So now you're telling me that Lewis Hamilton is in that car and isn't going to struggle? Of course he is, again, unless another variable even of material consequence was going to change. To that, Lewis Hamilton gave some interviews after the Spanish Grand Prix, and he said, the question came something like this: is there any takeaways? Can you take any positives, Lewis, from the Spanish Grand Prix race weekend? To which Lewis Hamilton responded, no, none. And then you see the footage of a cheeky crash incident that's going round the social medias, alluding to the fact that Sir Lewis was on the more than on the gearbox of Franco Colapinto. It's like, what's he doing? Then you see the actual footage that Alex Albon is desperately trying to encroach upon Sir Lewis's space in the pit lane, and Lewis responds in kind by bunching up, concertina effecting, making sure that there's not a gap between him and the car in front in Franco Colapinto. Listen to me, but for Lewis Hamilton at the moment, when it rains, it pours. Legend of the channel, friend of the channel, PTD Windsor, has told you on a gazillion occasions that what you shouldn't expect from Sir Lewis is for him to trounce Charles Leclerc. That would be naive, ambitious, reachy. Again, 40 years old. Yeah, he's Sir Lewis Hamilton, but he's Sir Lewis Hamilton at the latter stages of his career. Some people have said if you talk about extracurricular activities and you are an F1 driver, then you should think about doing something else in earnest, in real time. Don't wait, don't delay. This isn't me encouraging Sir Lewis Hamilton to retire, but I don't want to see the dude's legacy tarnished. I don't. Desperately. Not Sir Lewis Hamilton that I grew to love, 2014, 2007 Sir Lewis Hamilton, but maybe, ladies and gentlemen, that's just me. That's just my opinion. I think Max is a brilliant racing driver, by the way, but he's a bully, a petulant child, and I've had enough of people explaining his on-track behaviour away, says Jody. Oh, the humanity, Jody. It's either black or it's white. It's X or it's Y. There can be no in between. The F40 pictures look pretty hilarious now, says Hans. The set expectations mega high just to underperform each and every weekend. Go on then, Hans. What did you want Ferrari to do? Did you want them to just slay? Look, listen, again, you don't want to set expectations unnecessarily highly. This is Luca Montezemola's point. But what did you expect? They were signing Lewis Hamilton, and maybe what were they to do even? But celebrate it. I don't know. Are we living in the real world here? I get it. It doesn't look good. It does not look good, especially if we're having the conversation under the umbrella heading of performance. But it is what it is, man. I don't know what we're going to expect between now. Listen, we'll go later. Long shakedown with Baxter and Shez, of course. And we'll go long a little bit later where we discuss Paul threads, Paul at all the pertinent F1 bits and bobs. It's techie than techie things. Listen, and we've got, by the way, we've got a couple of weeks, right? Next weekend, no Grand Prix. And then we get back to round 10 in about 10 days' time. Between now and next time, as always, the prosecution rests. No further questions, Your Honour.